Welcome to Odor Always Moves, with a video series where we translate the complexity of odor movement down to the operational level for canine handlers and trainers. This is the 8th video in the series, and we're going to talk about thermal convection. And really all that is just the movement of air caused by heat. As always, these are dedicated to my first bomb dog, Daisy. These are for educational purposes only. They're just meant to show the general concepts of odor movement in a realistic setting. If you want something more complicated, reach out to me or others, but this is again just to educate you on the overall concept. So what is thermal convection and the importance of hot and cold air? Well, I think most of us know that hot air rises. If you don't know that, you should really have paid attention during high school science class. So hot air rises due to buoyancy forces, and specifically related to the air being less dense because it's moving faster. Okay, and it's less dense than the surrounding colder air. Okay, now we've all seen this though. We've seen it in hot air balloons and steam rising from boiling water. Okay, that's really all that's going on. And cold air, because it's moving less, when I say moving, the molecules is what I'm referencing. The molecules are moving less, they're less excited, so it's going to be denser and thus will fall in warmer air. So if you want more information on that, there's some good science and physics videos out there. Go check them out. But that's about the extent I'm going to go into that level of detail on that topic. But we see this very regularly every day and mainly in the weather. Air movement between areas of high and low temperatures is something, that we see every day because, well, that's what's causing the weather. And, that's also creating those high and low pressure zones and the storm fronts and all of that. Again, lots of great information out there. Go check it out. But none of this is new. This is all commonalities of our world that we live in. But now we're going to take it and try to apply it to the context of canine work. And specifically, we're going to look at rooms and heat sources in buildings. And it can apply to vehicles and such too, but really for this videos, we're just going to focus on buildings. And so if I have a heat source here, okay, I got a wood stove. This air around this wood stove is going to be hotter than the surrounding air. It's going to be heated up and it's going to want to rise. It's going to hit the ceiling and it's going to go across the ceiling. And either it's going to cool down enough to where it's going to want to drop, or it's going to hit an opposite wall or some kind of barrier and then drop down. The other thing that may facilitate that drop is if I have a window, say it's wintertime out, and that window is really cold, that will also make the air denser and cause it to fall. It'll come across and you'll develop this circular pattern. And sometimes that's called the chimney effect, okay, where the odor, for whatever reason, rises. In this context, this is specifically related to heat. It's going to rise, it's going to go across, it's going to hit a barrier, or it's going to cool down enough, and then it's going to drop down again. It forms a circle, okay? Now, what is important is that the air movement is typically much slower than what you would see with a ventilation system. Okay, because this video is, again, we're just looking at air movement caused by heat differentials. And in doing my research and running some models, it comes out to about 5 times slower. And that's just an approximate. That's just something I kind of came up with. But it's about 5 times slower than what you would see if the ventilation system was turned on. But the key is it's moving. And if the air is moving, we all know from the prior videos, that means the odor is moving as well. Now, what if it's cold? Okay, cold odor. Okay, the molecules are gonna sublimate slower. Okay, because it's tied into the temperature and the vapor pressure, and so the lower the temperature, the less odor is going to be given off. But it's also going to spread out slower. Okay, so not only are you going to get less odor, but it's going to spread out more slowly. Okay, but if I have a heat source and that odor is being released and it's hot, it's going to sublimate a lot of odor. Okay, a lot of odorous gas is going to be released, but it's also going to spread out really quickly. And we're going to see that matters. So just because a lot of odor is being released doesn't mean that there's going to be a lot of odor far away from that source at a detectable level, because if it's hot enough, those gas molecules are bouncing all over and they're spreading out really quickly, and so the concentration drops off quickly. Okay, so two models today. First model, it's going to be an odor placed on a heat source in a large room with the high ceilings, and we'll see how important that is. And what this is, and this was a real scenario. I did not get video of this just because at the time, didn't even think about it. But this was a large empty building. It was like a vehicle showroom and stuff. These light blue colors. Those are windows, and those are set at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was actually wintertime. You could go up to those windows and touch them, and it was very cold to the touch. And this portion of the room, you could actually kind of see your breath over here. And this was a gas stove, kind of a gas fireplace, space heater type thing, set at a very low setting. Okay, so I could touch it. I could open the panel and what didn't burn me at all. And so it was like just a pilot light was on. So I set the odor in this top little panel, thinking, oh well, it's hot. It's going to give off a lot of odor, and the dogs are gonna find it. Well, a little to my surprise, yeah, just because I didn't understand odor movement as well as I do now, is that only one dog out of, I want to say 5 dogs that ran this search, only one dog actually found this one. Okay. And why was that? Well, you can see that the heat is going up. This is just showing the heat. This isn't the odor. This is just kind of the extent of the heat at the limits that I showed. And so the heat's definitely going up. It's spreading out, going to this corner. Okay. And you can see here, so if I do a particle stream, this is just looking at the pathway, and I use the dog as my limit of, I want to know what the particle stream is going, through the dog and, by its nose. I wanted to see where that was at. And so you can see this plume is coming up, following the heat, just as we would expect. It comes up, hits the ceiling, comes across, and starts diving down, and then you get this circular pattern here. Okay, and it's coming back up and doing the circular pattern. And then this stuff is all caused by the windows, the cold windows where the airflow is dropping down. So it's much slower, much less consistent. And so that's, just something to kind of keep in mind in visualizing this area. But one thing that is important to understand is right here, there's a structural beam that's dividing the ceiling space between this area here and this area here. So this beam actually acts as a barrier for the heat. Okay, even though the heat's coming out here, the majority of the heat's getting trapped up in this area here. And so if this beam wasn't here, you would see another circular pattern over on this way, just like we see on this side. But the reason we're not seeing it like that is because this beam is blocking it. And you can see this beam here. This is a little more clear now. Okay, but now you can see this is your circular pattern. The pathway is going up, hitting the ceiling, coming across, hits this far corner, comes down, starts these circular patterns, eventually works its way back here. And this is all kind of a jumbled flow, all caused by this uh, air movement down the windows because it's colder than the interior temperatures. Okay, and so, but you still see there's a circular pattern here. It's just a little more jumbled and not nearly as pronounced. So let's take a look at what the concentrations are like. We kind of have an understanding of the air movement, and this is where things get a little interesting in this one. So this far one, this is a concentration level of 1 part per million. And if you're confused about concentration, go watch my prior video. And you can see that it's barely, and this is at the end of the model time. Okay, so it's just very localized. And if you remember in the prior animation where it showed the molecule spreading out very quickly from the hot source, that's what's going on here. Is basically the gas is there. It's actually spread out, but it's spread out so fast that it can't maintain concentration because what's being released here isn't able to keep up with it. So this is the area of higher concentration. And interestingly enough, the dog that did detect it, I believe it was Canine Miles, he was the only one that went right by the stove, and he happened to have his head high as he went by, and then did a head snap, and then got on top of it, and then got the source. Okay, and if you look at this though, this is the next level. So this is 1 part per billion. Okay, and again, but it's still right there by the stove. It's not really spread out. And this is 1 part per trillion. That may not even be detectable to a dog, depending on the odor type. Okay, so it's just not getting out there. And again, we know the odor is moving, we know it's out there, but because it's heated up and it's spreading out so fast, the source is not sublimating enough to keep up with that concentration level. Now, this is just the I just wanted to see how far out this odor actually went. I don't even want to say how many, how many parts per, quadrillion, zillions, who knows. It's just a lot of zeros. But that's how many times lower concentration this is. So again, the odor's there. It's just in such a low concentration you can't detect it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So the second model, this is an interesting one because it was very recent. It was actually just the prior week to recording this video. And the odor was placed high behind a TV next to a very large window that was exposed to direct sunlight. And this is the room. It was a VIP box at the local university football stadium. And you had doors on each side, so the temperatures out in the adjoining hallways were much cooler. But this room, the temperature was fairly warm, and the window was substantially warmer because it was in direct sunlight. So I could put my hand on it, but it was notably warmer. And it was kind of a curved area on this back, and there were some cabinets that I didn't put into the model. It wasn't relevant. But there was TVs here in the corner, and that's where the hide was. Okay, and this was an interesting scenario, and that's actually what motivated me to make this video this video this time because I had experienced it firsthand. Now you can see because the window's heated up, we have that circular motion just like we've talked. It's coming up, hitting the ceiling, coming across, dropping down, and then it's going to come across the floor, jump up over that half wall or around it, depending on its location, hit the window again because of the heat, and it's caught up again. And it's just that nice circular motion. And if I just looked at the where the source is and looked at the streamers there, same circular motion, a little bit tighter. Okay, nothing too extreme there. And you can see the directional arrows, and the lighter arrows indicate that there's a little faster velocity, but again, this is all very slow. Again, it's about 5 times slower than what a ventilation system was running. And there was no ventilation system running while I was doing this search. Okay. So here's the live search. This is actually the second time that Dante went in the room. The first time I didn't get there quick enough to get video of him. He kind of went in and went out. And so this one had the best view of it. So he goes in, he goes immediately over to that corner, but then jumps back out, runs over to the back wall, and this is where he shows the most interest. Well, I think you can all understand why he was showing the most interest. That's where the error was moving. And this was totally my error, because he actually missed this. I had to, it was a double blind search. I had to call the helper and say, okay, where'd you put it? And the reason being is Dante actually, not in this one, but our third time in that room, because I had suspicions it was in it, I didn't go visually check those TVs, and that was my bad. I should have known it was Chimney in there, and that was totally my error, because he actually fringe alerted on the cabinet right by the door that he just came out. Okay, so if I run this model, you can see the odors moving, coming along that pathway, which is what we would expect. And it comes over here and starts getting into, and it reaches a limit out here to where all of a sudden it will start curling back in, and you can start seeing this stuff drop down, but it gets picked up in that flow, and then it starts getting constrained, pulled back in, and depending on the timing and the concentration levels, um, this will be a little bit clearer. Depending on the concentration levels and the time of when the dog comes in, he may or may not. A couple of times he went over here and he acted, but then he would step down in here and he'd lose the odor. Well, now I understand why. And he did that fringular right here on a cabinet. And now that I've seen this model, I know that he was actually likely an odor, but it just wasn't enough to where I could, say yes, you are on source, because he wasn't. I didn't reward him. It wasn't a convincing enough indication, but I think he got into odor enough to where he was like, hey, I'm gonna indicate. Um, but the fact that it was over here, and that was my bad for not going and checking that source, understanding that that convection is occurring. So that's why I share this. I share my errors, and hopefully you guys can learn from this. Now, some may be wondering, it's like, wait a minute, why the big difference between Model 1 and Model 2? Well, here's why. Model 1 uh, was basically the odor sublimation rate was 12 times less than the odor in Model 2. And that was based on the materials. They were different target materials. Okay. And I won't go into what those materials are. It's not important. But they were drastically different source materials. And then the odor in Model 1 as well spread out 3 times slower than the odor in Model 2. So the odor in Model 2, the source material, it had a higher diffusion coefficient, so it spreads out faster naturally. Okay, but one of the big factors in both of these, though, is the ceilings. So the lower ceiling in Model 2 allowed that odor to concentrate and maintain concentration as it moved along that wall and that ceiling space. Whereas the other one, it just had all that open space, and that odor, because it was heated up, it was moving fast, the molecules were, it spread out too quickly for the sublimation rate to keep up with it. Okay, so several things that were contributing to the difference, but this is again goes back to the importance of understanding concentrations, sublimation rates, how the source material that you're looking for behaves in those settings, and just the fact that temperature differentials in an environment will result in odor movement. So, summary in all this, um, temperature differences in the area, they definitely can cause air and odor movement. Okay, that's rooms, buildings, cars, etc. And just so you know, I've actually seen this in cars where we've done hides where it was really, really hot out, and you could see the thermals, going straight up, and that was a factor in terms of the dogs being able to locate the hide more effectively. And then movement is typically slower, so the air movement, the odor movement, is typically slower than that caused by ventilation systems. I found it to be about 5 times slower, but that's just an approximate number. And then heat sources such as radiators, stoves, fireplaces, and windows exposed to direct sunlight will result in the air rising at those locations. Okay, and that air movement, it's always up at that heat source, always going vertical. Then it's going to go across the ceiling if it's there until it either cools enough or it hits a barrier and that forces it to drop down. And that's sometimes called the chimney effect, and that's a circular pattern. Okay, so just something to kind of keep in mind. And this happened to be the dog that found that hide during that search and with the little stove. He was the only one who did. So Canine Miles, unfortunately, he passed away this last year. Upcoming stuff is going to do the urban terrain next. I meant to do that first, but was more motivated to do this. And so that's going to talk about Venturi effect, and I still want to work on some additional models possibly for that. And then Buried hides and the effects of vegetations. I already have some models built for that. Vegetation's influence on airflows. We kind of did that, but we're going to get into a little more in depth and look at like combined with mountainous terrain and all that. And then buildings. I actually had somebody reach out to me about doing buildings with closed loop ventilation systems, such as hospitals, and that's something kind of on the back burner. I got to figure out how best to do that. I hope this was helpful, and if you got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks.